The moment he stepped across the threshold, rain soaking through his jacket and pride heavier than the storm clouds outside, Caleb knew his life was balanced on something fragile and unseen. One wrong breath, one unguarded memory, and everything he had spent years running from would finally catch him. The house smelled like old books, coffee, and forgiveness he did not believe he deserved, and when the door closed behind him, it sounded too much like the end of an escape. Before the story pulls you deeper, take a second to like, comment, share, and subscribe if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet miracles that happen when broken people choose to stay instead of running. Caleb had not planned to end up in Oregon, let alone on the front porch of Grace Whitmore's house, with his knuckles sore from knocking and his heart thudding like it wanted to flee. He had driven for hours after his truck finally gave up somewhere outside Eugene, the engine coughing its last breath like an old man tired of fighting. He had no money left worth mentioning, no job waiting, and no family he trusted enough to call. Grace was not family by blood, but she was the closest thing he had left. Years ago, she had been his wife's closest friend, the one who held her hand through hospital visits and prayed softly in waiting rooms. Years ago, before everything fell apart, before grief turned into silence, and silence into distance, Grace had changed since he last saw her. The lines around her eyes spoke of long days and longer nights, but there was still a steadiness about her, something rooted and warm. She had invited him in without hesitation, and that alone cracked something inside him. Caleb carried guilt like a second spine, and every step into that house reminded him of promises broken and years wasted. He noticed the photographs on the walls, children grown, holidays past, faces smiling at a future that once included him and then suddenly did not. He had lost his wife, Hannah, to an illness that drained her slowly, cruelly, leaving behind medical bills and a silence that screamed at him every night. After her death, Caleb did not know how to stay still. He chased work across states, burned bridges with silence, and learned to sleep anywhere but where memories lived. Pain followed him like a shadow, and he mistook movement for healing. That night, Grace offered him the safety of her home, and something in her kindness scared him more than the rain or the dark road behind him. He made it clear, clumsily and defensively, that he was not a charity case, not someone to be tucked away on a sofa like an afterthought. His pride rose up, bruised and loud, because sleeping on a sofa felt too much like admitting he had nowhere else to go. Grace listened without judgment, and the quiet understanding in her eyes was heavier than any argument could have been. The guest room had been untouched for years, its bed neatly made, as if waiting for someone who had been lost and might one day return. When Caleb sat on the edge of it, exhaustion finally pressed down on him, not just in his bones but in his spirit. He slept poorly, haunted by dreams of hospital corridors and empty hands, but when morning came, light filtered in gently, and for the first time in a long while, he did not wake up afraid. Days turned into a fragile routine. Grace never asked him why he stayed so long, and Caleb never explained. He fixed things around the house without being asked, repaired a loose step, cleaned out the garage, and found comfort in small, tangible victories. Grace worked at a local community center, helping families who lived one bad month away from losing everything, and sometimes she came home tired in a way that went beyond physical exhaustion. Caleb saw himself in the people she helped, and it unsettled him. The real challenge came not from poverty or uncertainty, but from the slow resurfacing of emotions Caleb had buried deep. Being in a stable place forced him to confront the grief he had numbed with miles and distractions. At night, he found himself sitting on the porch, listening to the wind in the trees, remembering Hannah's laughter and the way she believed in him even when he could not. He wrestled with shame for leaving, for not being strong enough to stay rooted in the life they had built. Grace noticed his restlessness, and instead of pressing him with questions, she invited him to volunteer with her one afternoon. At the center, Caleb met people named Thomas, Rebecca, and Michael, each carrying stories heavier than their smiles suggested. He helped unload boxes, listened more than he spoke, and something unexpected happened. For the first time in years, he felt useful in a way that did not require running. The turning point came quietly. One evening, after a long day, Grace mentioned how the house felt fuller with him there, how presence could be a gift even when words failed. Those words stayed with Caleb through the night, echoing in places he had sealed off. He realized that his refusal to sleep on the sofa had never been about furniture. It had been about dignity, about wanting to believe he still deserved a place where he mattered. As weeks passed, Caleb found work at a local repair shop, run by a man named Arthur who valued effort over past mistakes. The job was modest, but it grounded him. He began to save a little, to imagine a future measured not in miles traveled but in mornings returned to the same place. The house no longer felt like a temporary shelter but like a pause, a breathing space where healing could take root. Grace never tried to replace Hannah, never crossed lines that grief had drawn in Caleb's heart. Instead, she became a steady presence, a reminder that love did not vanish when one chapter ended. It transformed, softened, and sometimes showed up as a spare room and a warm meal. Caleb's greatest struggle was forgiving himself. Some nights, the weight of regret pressed down so hard he thought it might break him. But each morning, he chose to stay. He learned that staying was not weakness, but courage. It meant facing memories without fleeing, allowing kindness to touch wounds that had long been ignored. The day his truck was finally repaired, Caleb stood in the driveway, keys heavy in his hand. He could leave, return to the road that once felt safer than stillness. Grace watched from the porch, offering no pressure, only trust. In that moment, Caleb understood that second chances were not always dramatic or loud. Sometimes they were as simple as choosing not to go. He decided to rent a small apartment nearby, close enough to the life he was building, far enough to stand on his own. The night before he moved out, the house felt different, filled with gratitude and a quiet sadness that marked the end of something meaningful. Caleb packed his few belongings, each item lighter than the burdens he had carried in with him. Before this story reaches its final heartbeat, please take a moment to comment below and share what second chances mean to you. Your words might be the encouragement someone else needs today. On his last morning there, Caleb woke early and stood in the doorway of the guest room. He remembered the man who had arrived soaked in rain and pride, refusing his sofa because he feared becoming invisible. He smiled at the memory, not with bitterness, but with compassion for the person he had been. He left the room tidy, the bed made, as if preparing it for someone else who might need it one day. As Caleb drove away, the road ahead no longer felt like an escape. It felt like a continuation. He carried with him the lesson that dignity was not about refusing help, but about accepting it with humility and then passing it on. Grace stood in the rearview mirror, smaller with distance, but her impact remained vast and steady. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that kindness can change the direction of a life, please like, share, and engage with this video. Your support helps stories like this reach those who need them most. Caleb would go on to build a quieter life, one anchored in service and honesty, learning that home was not a place he had lost forever. It was something he could choose again, every day, by staying, by opening the door when someone knocked, and by offering more than a sofa to those who arrived carrying storms of their own.